Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We're Spark Partners. We're here every week to discuss what's happening in the world of trends. And of course, besides being trend casters, Adam and I are also consumers. And of course, as consumers, we're sort of have to deal with all the ins and outs of buying and selling and returning and all that. And I know, Adam, you had a recent experience that I want you to share with our community here to help start the conversation of customer service and why it's so important, especially in this day and age, to align your company vision, as we always say, to trends. And of course, one of those tenets is customer service. So explain to us your frustration and let's go from there.
Yeah, well, when I lived in Chicago, and I lived there for 25 years, and suburban Chicago, and when they came along and said, we're going to run a wire down the front of your house for cable TV, would you like to sign up? I was one of the first. And I had small children. I was delighted to get the extra channels so they could be better entertained. And the only service was Comcast, which they now call Xfinity. And I had that service for, I guess, 15 years, maybe longer. But I just hated it. I hated everything about doing business with them. You couldn't call them on the phone and get a reasonable answer to a question. You were constantly shuttled off, going through prompts and having to hit buttons and them guessing at what your problem is with a computer and being way wrong and no way to get to talk to somebody. And I mean, it was horrible. To the point that whenever I left Chicago and I called them up to cancel the service, I almost couldn't get the service canceled. I mean, I think in the end, I ended up saying my credit card got stolen and getting a new credit card so they wouldn't charge my credit card every month because I couldn't get them to cancel the service. And the big reason they wouldn't cancel the service was because the name on the account was both mine and my wife's. And of course, at that point, it was after her stroke and she wasn't there anymore. And so when I couldn't produce her to confirm that I wanted to cancel the service, they said I had to keep the service. So
That's
I
insane.
think, as I recall now, this was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. I recall when I finally just discontinued the credit card. It was the only way I could get it stopped. So now I'm staying here with my girlfriend in Napa, California this week, and the internet and the service went out, and she has Comcast. So I said, "Oh gosh," and we started down the road of making those calls again. And I can tell you, Comcast isn't any better than it used to be. You get on the phone and you call, and you got to go through a lot of prompts. And they must have told me 4 or 5 times that there was a problem with the passwords had been stolen, and there's all kinds of information about the password, which had nothing to do with why I was calling. I was calling because my service was out. And then they had this way they could automatically test the cable modem. And the cable modem, the computer would say, well, your cable modem isn't working. We want you to unplug your cable modem, wait 30 seconds, plug it back in again, and we will text you in 10 minutes. And I would say, look, I've been at this for 4 hours. I have tested this cable modem. I got a second cable modem. I'm talking this way to a computer, realize, and trying to get some kind of method to get through this. I finally get through after an hour, and I get somebody on the phone, and then all I can hear is because it's on some kind of a compute. It's one of these systems using over-the-top technology, the very lowest cost method for a phone call, and they're in a foreign country, and it's just picking up all this background noise, and it's getting all kinds of echoes, and I can't hear anything, right? And so finally I hear the girl say, I will call you back. I get that much out of it, and she, after a little bit more, I hear her repeat my phone number. I hang up, they never called back. Never ever called back. I waited like 45 minutes or an hour. I called again. It took me 4 more phone calls, another hour and a half on the phone. Finally, I get to a technician and I say, hey, I don't know they're a technician. I get to a person and I said, hey, the internet and just went out. My whole system went out 5 hours ago and it hasn't come back on. And I have rebooted the cable modem 10 or more times. And I got a second cable modem and it didn't work either. And I kept chasing back the cable all the way to the outside of the house. Every time there was a connection, I would hook the cable modem up to it to do a test. So I kept testing all these different points of failure, and it didn't matter, and nothing worked. And so it finally, after 5 hours, I was able to get an agreement for a technician to come. And then about 5 minutes ago, my phone rings and it's Xfinity. So they're supposed to come. It's now 2:00 here, and they're supposed to come at 3:00 for the technician. And as it happened, when I got up this morning, the internet was working. Okay, everything was working. So, but this is the third time this problem has come up, right? So I get this phone call, and it's somebody from Xfinity. It says Xfinity on my phone. Okay, so I think I better answer this. Maybe they're going to come early. And when I answered the call, there's a long pause, and I'm thinking this must be some kind of a scam or something. And then finally, a person comes on, and they're clearly Indian, and they're clearly not in the United States. Again, talking on this really cheap line with all the background noise and hissing and echoing, and the person barely speaks English, and they speak it with such a heavy accent I can hardly understand anything they're saying. I have to make them repeat it again 2, 3 times. And finally they said, "Did your internet come back on?" And I said, "Yes, it came back on today." And they said, "Well, we want to cancel your appointment." And I said, "Look, this is the third time that I've had this outage. And when I call, you say there is no outage. And when you do the tests down the line, you say there's a problem with the line. And the last 2 times it came on and I agreed you didn't come. This is the third time. Come to my house because there's some kind of a problem on this line, on this outside of my house that is causing the system to go down." So now I have been at this for 22 hours trying to get customer service to
Yeah.
do something with Comcast. And I've had a lot of interaction with a computer that didn't accomplish anything except make me angry. I got shut down and told I'd be called back. I didn't get called back. It just, in all respects, Comcast is just there is no worse customer service out there that I can think of ever anywhere than Comcast. And they've been
Yeah.
like this for 20 years. For
Well,
20
I think you're hitting on something interesting. So, who else can you get your internet from where you live right now?
Well, I think I could probably hook on to either Dish or DirecTV. That might be an option for me.
Yeah.
But the last time I heard, all I could get from them was television. They didn't really have an internet service
Right.
through what they did. So I don't know that this location, that my girlfriend's location, I don't know that it actually will, that there is another alternative other than using my phone as a hotspot.
Yeah. And see, I think that's the thing with when there's organizations like that, like Comcast and Xfinity, that has almost a monopoly on service in your area. They don't really have to have a robust customer service. But for instance, on the other side of the coin, when I bought something from Amazon, something for a truck that I'm outfitting to be an outlanding truck and this and that, and I installed it, and it was this very complicated wire harness. And at the end of the day, everything was installed, bolted into the side of my truck, but I had this wire harness that I spent 2 hours fishing through the drywall or the firewall, and it didn't work. So I went to Amazon and I said, "Hey, this doesn't work." And what they said is, "No problem. We'll send you a new box with the whole kit. You take what you need from there, and then whatever else you send back, no cost." And I thought that was
Yeah.
amazing because that's exactly what I wanted. But guess what? I have more options. If that didn't work, if I had shopping in Amazon is, of course, there's other options out there. So they're very robust in their customer service. And I think, your experience with Xfinity, they're trying to use AI. They didn't do a good job. They have all this amazing access to technology, but like you said, it was a cheap line. It was a bare minimum amount of customer service. And at the end of the day, they lose the most. And of course, the consumer loses as well.
Well, before I started podcasting with you, Manny, and went to the modern world, I used to be a blogger, and for about 15 years, I blogged out. And the three companies that beat up on the most were Microsoft, which I'm now a fan of Microsoft because they've changed, Comcast, and United Airlines, right? And the interesting thing is Microsoft changed. I mean, they got a new CEO and they changed the strategy of the company, and they become big in a lot of new products, and they're no longer the sort of company that you hate doing business with. Not the best customer service, but not one of the three worst, I wouldn't say. But then you go to Comcast and United, and they haven't changed. I mean, their culture is still something that says, well, just do what's absolutely the cheapest thing that you can possibly do, and don't worry about the customer at all. I don't know how many people out there remember, but about a decade ago, there was a fellow who watched a guy a baggage handler at United throw his guitar out the side of the plane. It landed, broke.
Yep.
He wrote a song called "United Breaks Guitars." It went on to
Yeah.
YouTube and it went viral, and and he wrote a book in which he went through the whole story about how it all happened and writing the song, and everybody he talked to, he kept very fastidious notes, and everybody he talked to. And at the end of the day, they never apologized. for breaking the guitar, and they never got him a new one, even though this video was running on YouTube, and they didn't do anything about it. It was just like, well, it'll go away, eventually go away. And then I don't know if you recall, but it was just, I think a couple of years ago where United announced they had a plane full of people, and they said, one of you have to leave. And the people were all sitting there, and they said, yes, we have to get a flight attendant to the following location so that she can work. And so for our operational reasons, one of you customers have to get off this plane. Now, that's the worst customer service, right?
Yeah.
Then terrible. When nobody would get off of the plane, somehow they picked the person. I don't know what their process was to pick the person, but they go down and they said, you need to leave, sir. Then he says, no, I'm not going to leave. And so they went and got a security guard and brought him on the plane. And he told the security guard, I'm not going to leave. And they proceeded to drag him out, breaking out the front teeth out of his mouth as they manhandled him, pushed him down, kicked him, and everything else. And it turns out the man was a medical doctor, a surgeon, and he was scheduled to do surgery on a child the next morning at like 6 a.m. And he had no alternative method to get to the destination in order to do this surgery. And United, again, never said sorry. Right? They don't even say anything. So it's amazing to me how a company for so long can just have this attitude that customer service doesn't matter. And what's shocking about it is in the case of United, they do have competition, but the reality is the competition isn't really any better. Right? You've got an industry think going on there, and that industry think is all that matters is cost. And so in order to get the seat in the back of the plane sold for $89, they treat everybody badly, regardless if you're a business traveler that travels all the time, but regardless if you perhaps paid $200 or $300 to upgrade from an economy seat to a first class seat, or you paid $50 to go from the back of the plane to the front of the plane where the seat leg room's a couple inches bigger, you still all get treated like, at best a steer. Right? Yeah. Going through the chute in a cattle yard.
And now they're talking about staggering the seats. Have you heard of that?
No, so tell me.
Talking about doing 3 seats, and rather than 3 seats in front of you, it's going to be 3 seats or 5 seats or whatever on some stilts about 1.5 feet above you, so that they can squeeze in about 3 extra rows times 6 extra rows. Right? Can you imagine that? Basically, you're going to be riding on a 5-hour flight with somebody's butt right in your face. I just can't imagine that would ever fly.
Well, last week I did a lot of traveling, and before I left, you'd asked me if I could work on a paper for our business, and I had to tell you that honestly, I can't work on planes anymore. There was a time when I would open my laptop and I would work, but nowadays there's just not enough room between the seats, and frequently I get in the exit row, I pay extra so I can sit in the widest seat, and there's just no room, right? And certainly if you're not on exit row, then the row in front of you can lean back, and you're trying to work, and you got your device open and you're just getting whacked, and it's you can't really work on a plane, and that's that's bad for productivity for us as customers, and for years that was the customer they looked forward to. They said, who's the person on the plane, the business flyer, because they do multiple flights. I do at least 20 legs every year, often many more than that, could be twice that much easily in any given year, and I'm the kind of customer that you want. And instead, they don't know me from the person that gets on a plane once every 5 years. We all get treated. Yeah, they don't know me from Adam. Is right. So it is shocking because it can pay off. Like you said, with Amazon, buy more stuff. I had a somewhat similar experience in that I bought a part for some landscape plumbing that I was doing, and when I got the part, it said it was going to be what I needed. My landscaper took a look at it and said, wait, no, this is way too involved. No, I got a much simpler, easier way to handle this. And so just like you, I just went online and I found my order, and I clicked that I wanted to return the product. And they immediately sent me by email a thing to print. That was I printed it off, and it said, just take this into the Whole Foods store. And that's all I did. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even have a package. I didn't have any wrap or anything else. I had the part and this piece of paper with some kind of a return message on it. And the guy at Whole Foods, there was a place there that said Amazon returns. I walked up, handed it to him, and boom, I was done. Yeah. But then I've heard how they treat now that they've got customer service. They and other people are starting to treat this like an opportunity, a business opportunity. And this is where I'm fascinated, and it's what just our message of growth and looking around inside of a problem, finding an opportunity. And I think you had experience where some places like Costco and Amazon, what they're doing with returns is rather than try to run it back through the system or go through the work of trying to figure out to return it to the manufacturer, or if it perhaps is the box is now a little damaged, they don't want to put it on the shelf. They're opening stores, so they're just taking this back. Customer wants this, says, okay, fine,
Yeah.
no problem, we'll take it back. Here's your money. Showed us a receipt, showed us down. We give you your money back, and we take the product, and then they're running it off to another store location where people can buy it,
Yeah.
and the customer gets happy about the return. But as I understand it, the pricing is quite good in these other stores, so
Yeah,
people are
it is.
buying these products. Didn't you have
As
some
I
experience with
understand it, I do. As I understand it, what they do is they take the value of the product. I don't know. Say, for instance, happen to have this little Allen wrench tool in my hand, right? Say this was $8 that I bought at Ace Hardware or at Costco or wherever, or at Walmart. I didn't like it, or something was wrong with it. I returned it. So rather than spend the money on putting it back into the system, putting it in a new package, all that, they just auction it off or sell it off to these third-party liquidators. And I happened to go to one of these one time a few years ago, and it was it was almost like a yard sale, but with everything was brand new.
yeah.
And brand new, there was things that had a scratch or a dent in it. There was these big heaters that they have with the propane heaters. One of them had a little bit of a ding on the side of it that maybe you need it for your barn. You don't care if it's aesthetically pleasing, but it was 50% off. And so I think these places exist in major towns, major cities, and it's a whole business opportunity that they've taken advantage of.
So when I was in college in the late '70s, Sears was still a big operation. People really did buy a lot at Sears in the '70s. It's hard for
Yep.
people to believe that now, but they did. And my father was a customer. I have two sisters that are much older than me, and they were customers. And people would buy appliances there. Sears, they called them Kenmore appliances. Washers, refrigerators. They also had tools called Craftsman that were considered a
Yep.
lifetime. If it broke, you just took it back to Sears. They gave you a new one. So this great reputation, all this. And one time, back in those days, I bought a tape. And it probably was an 8-track. It might have been a cassette. Don't remember right now off the top of my head. But I do remember I buy this tape and I go and I put it in my machine and it fouls. Okay. And it was brand new. So I take it back and I've got the plastic wrap and the tape is fouled. And I go in and I said, I want to return this. And they said, no. And I said, what? They said, yeah, no, we're not taking that back. It's a tape. And I said, why wouldn't you? Look, it fouled. It was a problem. It was probably wound wrong. And the guy looks at me and says, no, we're not going to give you your money back. And I said, if my father walked in here and wanted a tape, would you give him his money back? And he said, probably. But kid, I ain't going to listen to you. You've probably screwed that up. And I walked out of the store and I said I would never buy anything in a Sears store again. And I held true to that. I never, ever bought anything ever
Really?
again in a Sears store. And so that probably cost them, at least a couple $100,000 before the company went bankrupt. But that culture, that mindset of keep costs low, don't put the customer first, try to think about the company first, was already instilled in Sears to the point that we see then afterwards they just started making mistake after mistake after mistake until finally they just don't exist anymore, right? They ran themselves
Right.
out of business. And there was so many options they had to do better, but they just didn't. Okay, and this is often what we see happen inside of a company. If you from the top down, people have to think about the customer first. And if the CEO is running around saying, "Hey, we need to protect our P&L, we need to cut costs," the people at the front line of the organization, they'll hear that and they'll act upon it, and they'll do like the man did in Sears when he didn't want to take my tape back. They'll act. In ways in a retail store or in a service area environment where they'll say, no, we're not going to give you money back. We're not going to try to make good on the service. And as a result, you fall into the spiral that you're cost focused, not growth focused.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
it was just much better to say, how could we grow? And for example, this idea of take the product back and then run it through a liquidator to get rid of it, turn a problem into an opportunity. I'm sure it costs them something, but what it does for them in terms of keeping themselves highly competitive is quite good.
Yeah, so I really love the Sears story in all its sadness and madness. As a kid, living 2 hours away from the big city, I lived in a border town, and we'd go probably once a month to Tucson, and we'd go to Sears, and I just absolutely loved it. We got the Sears
Yeah,
catalog, and it was a whole kind of culture back in the 70s and 80s. And they had thousands and thousands of stores at one time, and I just looked, and of course, they filed for bankruptcy in 2019. I guess they won, but from I think at the height it had 4 or 5 thousand stores. Now they have 13 stores. And I
Yeah.
imagine, what are they even worth? They got rid of Kenmore. They sold that off to a private equity group. They got rid of Craftsman as well. So
I saw a
I don't even
Craftsman
understand
toolbox.
why they're alive.
Yeah, I saw a Craftsman toolbox in Home Depot the other day. I don't even know who makes it, and I don't know if I bought a Craftsman tool in Home Depot, is it guaranteed like it used to be in the old days? I doubt it. Right?
Who
They've
knows?
just slapped a brand name on it. Somebody's bought the brand name and put out there. And you know what? I imagine for people under the age of 30 or 35, they don't remember that old Craftsman brand logo and that kind of thing. You might remember Die Hard batteries. If you bought one, it was guaranteed for the life of your car. If it ever went bad, you could take it in. And that was
Yep.
a big sale. What the clever part of that was they realized that very few people kept a car more than 5 years. Most people just don't. And especially if you have, if your battery goes bad in your car, you've already had it 2 or 3 years. Now you've got a used car, right? And so you're
Right.
putting a new battery in it. What are the odds you'll keep it for more than 5 years? So instead of saying it has a 5 year warranty, they just said it's guaranteed for life, knowing that some fractional percentage of the people might use it until it fails and come back
Right.
in for a replacement. Most people would just sell the car. And when they sold the car, then they didn't have to worry about somebody returning it, right? So that's, if you think of where the customer is and what you want the customer to hear, you can turn these into big wins. But if you lose it, then you turn them into big losses, and
Yeah.
then you can end up going out of business. You're going to end up making these big mistakes.
Yeah. And I think this is a great opportunity to kind of discuss even though you may not be the incumbent in the industry, if you focus on trends, one of which is, of course, customer service, you can actually eat more or get more market share. A good example is, I'm a hunter, I'm an outdoorsman. You may not have heard of this brand, but have you ever heard of Vortex Optics?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay, so you've probably heard of Nikon, and then
Oh
there's
yeah.
there's other brands out there that have been around for a long time. Zeiss is a really good brand of optics, and so Leopold, of course. But I now only buy Vortex products. I have 4 or 5 binoculars. I've got 2 scopes, 3 scopes actually for my hunting rifles. So I have completely moved over to Vortex. Number one, because they have, in my opinion, superior optics for the money. But number two is their extremely generous customer support. If I drop my rifle or my binoculars and I break one of the lenses, I send it back to them, no questions asked. They send me a new pair. Now, of course, I take care of my stuff, so it's not likely going to happen. But guess what? They have now earned my business for the entirety of the way as they do business now, right? If they change their mantra and they start going back to what like Sears did with Craftsman, I might change my tune. But here's a company that came out of nowhere that is now becoming the de facto standard, and because they focus on customer service.
And it's not that hard to really pay attention to what customers need. The problem is often we just don't ask. That's the first thing. We don't ask what people want. The second thing is we don't watch our customers and how they behave. When many years ago, the car companies put little sensors on the doors, on the driver's door, and I think they had it on the passenger. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what happened was you could put a code when you bought the car. You put a code in, the dealer did, and then you could, to get into your car, you could walk up and you could hit your code, say 1, 2, 3 or whatever your code was, and the door would unlock. And that was a big advancement, people thought. But what they didn't realize was that really wasn't a whole lot better than having a key. Then what really you needed was a way to open the door when your hands were full, right? And then you
Yeah.
watched how people did things, and that led to, you might know the SUVs where you could wave your foot underneath the SUV, the rear of the SUV. If you had a key in your hand in your pocket and you wave your foot under that, and the back door would open up so that you sit the packages down. And for people with families, that was a really good thing. They watched the
Mhm.
customer and they saw what the customer needed. The keypad didn't really work that well. And so then they went obviously now to the fob, and almost everybody has one of those. You just push the button on the fob with your thumb, and boom, the door's open on the car. Right, makes life easy. And I always say this. Do you watch your customer? Do you just see how they use your product? Do you see how they find it difficult to use a product or good to use a product? In my presentations, I frequently talk about a company I knew that printed dog food bags. And one
Yeah.
of the things that they did was they didn't really think about how the bag was used. And we spent a couple of hours in a grocery store just watching people buy dog food. And you started to realize the bag made a big difference. You know, the size of the bag, the opening on the bag. People cared about those things. You know, could it reseal easily? And they had reasons they liked that. Some of the people did like the material of the bag. Like paper was more recyclable than plastic. And then also people read the bag. They read information on the bag. And so we started to see that, you know, by we could really help our manufacturers that were using our printing sell more dog food if they would change the bag. And so we moved the company into doing graphics work and doing bag design. Now they're not, you know, Ralston Purina wasn't interested in that. They're a big company, but there was a lot of people making smaller brands of dog food, some regional brands. Some of them were focused on a segment of the dog population, you know, like treats. And so those people, they didn't, they were just guessing with their bag. They didn't have they hadn't done any resource to say what would make a great bag. And by us being able to tell them what made a good bag, we were able to win them over. And so and then we got the print job, right? You designed the bag, got the print job. It was a big win for everybody. And so that's the thing that I think more people need to do right now in their businesses is take a look at what your customer does, look for their problems, and then solve their problems. That's good customer service, is solve their problems. If you do that, then you're going to be in business for a long time. If you focus on how do I do better, faster, and cheaper, what I've always done, how do I get control of my costs, how do I improve my performance on the metrics I've always used, then it's easy to become Sears, it's easy to become Toys R Us, where you're great at running a store, but then you're not so great at running a store, and then you're not a business anymore. You know,
Yeah.
competitors have taken over where you've been.
And it's amazing how fast that whole process happens. Another great example that we've talked about many times is the falling of Blockbuster. How within 18 months they became wildly irrelevant and eventually
Yep.
became just a memory. And you know, my
Went from
children don't know what Blockbuster is. Like I have to explain to them the
yeah.
process. And the only reason that they kind of understand what it is we do actually have a video rental place here in town, but they bolted on a bar, so you can go there, you can have a couple drinks, you can walk. They always have movies playing, and then you can walk out with a DVD, and it's kind of fun. They can have old movies and stuff. But again, they're not going to be at scale. It's just a little miniature, cottage industry here. But it's just remarkable how these giants fall.
So Blockbuster went from $6 billion of revenue to out of business, as you said, in about 4 years. Right, about 4 years, is all that took, and of course, the really steep decline was, as you said, the last 18 months. And the issue was that they had all those stores, and whenever Netflix, they start off, you remember mailing the DVDs to your house, right? And so you could keep it as long as you wanted. You had to wait for it to come in the mail, though. So the Blockbuster advantage was I get it now. It's immediate. I go to the store, I get it. The Netflix advantage was it was a little bit cheaper, but it came in the mail, so it had that level of convenience. And by the way, if I didn't get it back, for 3 or 4 days, there was no charge. I didn't have to pay extra. Whereas if I didn't get that video back to the Blockbuster store the next day, I had to pay an extra day's rental and a third day rental, all that kind of stuff could add
Yeah.
up. So there were two different models. But what happened was people got used to the convenience of having it delivered at home. And they'd say, once in a while I'll run down to Blockbuster, but I get a lot of this stuff just delivered to my house. And Blockbuster should have watched that. They would have seen that their own customers coming in the store, they could have asked them, do you like these? Do you take delivery at home? And most customers would be very honest about it. And then all you had to do was just go get the data. There was plenty of data out there about Netflix and how many customers they had. And you would know that it was impossible for Netflix customers to not also be Blockbuster customers,
Yeah.
or certainly former Blockbuster customers. And so they could have seen that trend and done something about it. But they saw the trend, and instead they started closing stores, tightening operations, focused on earnings per share. And Wayne Huizenga, the CEO, for 4 years, he was very proud that his earnings per share went up. And then, like I said, in 18 months, he was bankrupt because basically he closed stores, people got fired, loyalty went to toilet. Customers got to where they, if the Blockbuster wasn't just down the street, forget about it. I'm not going to go at all. And, they had nothing left as a business. And if they just watched their customers and thought about being good, good providers, providing good customer service, they wouldn't have gotten in that jam.
Very true. If our listeners are interested, go to Google and then Google Black Friday 2019, Black Friday 2020, and so forth, you'll see a huge decline. I mean, back in 22, I think, or 20 or 19, I think, it was just like a mob. These stores would get mobbed. You have this, hundreds of people running in, getting things in and running out, right? Now that I saw pictures of Black Friday, this 2023, about a month ago, and the stores were empty.
Yeah.
Why? People are buying online, right? It's
Yeah.
completely shifted. And I think it's really important for our listeners and viewers to understand that you've got to watch your customer. You've got to watch how they buy, go out to where they are, talk with them. And they're not going to give you all the answers, but they're going to give you some pretty significant clues on what you should be doing in your business. So with that, Adam, any final thoughts before we end this year of podcasting and, this customer focused podcast?
I want to make one prediction for 2024. People did not pay enough attention to the reduction in demand for commercial office space and retail space in 2022 and 2023. And it's going to create some kind of a crisis in 2024. Leases will be ending, and there are no people out there that want to that want those spaces. Hybrid office work is here to stay, and there's just too much commercial office space, too much retail office space. And there's going to be a lot of people defaulting. So if you own a retail REIT, or you own a real estate REIT, I would be getting out of that and keep your eyes open. We could even see one or more bank failures caused by inability to repay loans and mortgages related to those properties.
That should be very interesting to watch. Well, Adam, it's been a wonderful year. We'll talk with our base here next year. And Adam, have a wonderful holiday, and we'll talk with you later.
Happy holidays.
Cheers.